Who are the best systems integrators in the market? Microsoft's bundling regulatory issues and SAP Rise. Those are just a few of the topics we'll cover here in episode 262 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you.
3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 262. My name is Eric Kimberling, the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformations, and also part of Lander Talent, which is an IT and ERP staffing firm that can help you with your digital transformations. This podcast is tech-agnostic, covers everything related to the strategy, people, process, and technology sides of digital transformations, ERP and AI projects, any sort of enterprise technology initiative. We're here to chat about things that are relevant to you. Joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Got some fun stuff we're going to get into today, some meaty topics here. We're going to start off with some questions that we received on social media. We'll get into some newsworthy topics, including FTC digging deeper into Microsoft's bundling and licensing practices. And the FTC is a U.S. regulatory body. So Microsoft has had its past issues with the European Union and other regulatory bodies throughout the world. But today we'll talk about the U.S. Government, and it's digging deeper into Microsoft's bundling and licensing. We'll also talk about how AI in customer service is not the cost saver that you may think. So be sure to stick around for that. We've got a lot to cover there. And then later in the show, we are going to have Bonnie Tinder, who is the CEO of Raven Intel, which is a customer peer review site for system integrators. She's going to be on the show here today to talk about who some of the leading and highest rated system integrators are in the industry. So that should be a really interesting conversation. And by the way, this is a conversation that is not funded by or influenced by any of the systems integrators. She's going to be speaking purely from customer and peer reviews that are non-sponsored. So that's really important because it's all like sort of like the Yelp or the Google reviews of the enterprise tech space. So she'll be talking about some of the data that shows who some of the best system integrators are, at least the highest rated ones. And then later in the show, we will talk about SAP Rise, and more specifically, how to choose the right hyperscaler for your SAP Rise initiative. So if you're embarking on an SAP initiative or you're thinking about it, be sure to stick around for that. We're going to talk about that later in the show. So before we jump into all this great stuff, Darian, what are some of the questions we've received recently on social media?
Yeah, this first question is on SAP. So it's, if SAP ECC support ends in 2030, doesn't Kingfisher eventually have to move to S4HANA?
Great question. So this is in response to a video I made about the Kingfisher organization, which is a company that publicly presented its plan to not implement S4HANA, but to instead remain on ECC and innovate and future-proof and add new technologies to augment what they already have with SAP ECC without necessarily going down the path of an S4HANA upgrade. So the question then is, because SAP is discontinuing support for S4HANA in 2030, don't they have to move to S4HANA? And that's a great question, because it's a common misconception that because the vendor is cutting off our support, that must mean we have no choice but to move forward with the upgrade. And that is absolutely what they want you to think. And so by asking the question, I think it's a good thing you're asking the question, but the way you frame the question, and I'm not trying to pick on the person that asked this question, but the way that that person framed it suggests that maybe they don't know that there is an option. And that's something that's sorely lacking in this industry, is just the understanding that you do have alternatives, and that you, any choice you make is going to have risks. It's not just the risk of not upgrading. There is risk there, but there's this, I would argue, an even more significant risk of upgrading for some organizations. So short answer is no, you do not need to upgrade just because SAP or whoever your software vendor is. If you're a Microsoft customer, you might be facing the same thing. They have a similar timeline of decommissioning support for their products, or the legacy products. But just because you're unsupported doesn't mean you're unsupported. You may not have vendor support, but you can get support in other ways. You can go to third-party providers. There's companies like Rimini Street and Spinnaker Support that provide third-party maintenance and support for SAP, and they've committed to do it up until 2040. So that buys you another 10 years that you could be using ECC. You could keep your customization. You could build new innovation on top of ECC. You could, expand into other technologies. You could use AI. You could incorporate AI tools using the technology you already have. So there's other ways around it. You can get third-party support. You can hire resources. Yes, over time it gets more difficult. Yes, it will get more expensive over time because you'll have less and less resources over time that can support the product. But right now, there is such a robust ecosystem of knowledgeable people that know how to support ECC that you're fine well past 2030. As you get closer to 2040, you may start having a different conversation of, okay, we're getting a little rickety with our old technology and it's starting to break, and we're starting to become the way of the old mainframes or whatever. But for now, I mean, if you've got other ways to spend your capital and you want to get a better ROI and innovate and modernize your technology without the big, massive headache of a big, massive ERP implementation, then by all means do it. You've got to do what you got to do to run your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Great points there. This next question is also about SAP. It's, can SAP evolve fast enough to meet modern expectations, or will customers keep looking for more flexible alternatives?
Yeah, this is a good question. I think, SAP's strength has not been flexibility. That's not why people buy SAP, whether it was ECC or now S/4HANA. The reason they buy it is because it's scalable and it drives a certain amount of standardization throughout organizations, which is a good thing. A lot of organizations want to become not necessarily less flexible, but they're looking for more scale. They're looking to standardize their operations, and that's what SAP is good at. But the problem is SAP is not good at being flexible. It's not good at being open to other technologies. It's not good at, certainly not good at customized solutions, especially as more companies move to public cloud, which inherently means there's going to be less flexibility there. So yes, I think over time what will happen is SAP will become too monolithic and too cumbersome for organizations, and I think technology is just going to change too fast for SAP to keep up, at least with their current tech stack and their current product roadmap and their current strategy. I think there's sort of the big behemoth number one player that's sitting pretty right now. Their stock price is doing great. They're very profitable. They're driving up cloud revenue. All this stuff looks good in the short term, but I think strategically they've got some big problems longer term. So we'll see if I'm right or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great questions from our audience today, but I want to get into our first newsworthy article, which is about how the FTC is digging deeper into Microsoft's bundling and licensing practices. So this article explores how the U.S. Federal Trade Commission is intensifying its scrutiny of Microsoft's bundling and cloud licensing practices. Regulators are examining whether Microsoft's packaging of products like Office, Teams, and Azure creates anti-competitive advantage that limit customer choice and disadvantage competitors. According to this article, the FTC is investigating whether Microsoft licensing structures and bundling strategies unfairly steer customers towards its broader ecosystem. This includes concerns about tying collaboration tools such as Teams to Microsoft 365 subscriptions and structuring Azure incentives in ways that may discourage multi-cloud strategies. Regulators are also reviewing whether pricing, discounts, and enterprise agreements create barriers for competitors trying to win enterprise workloads. The scrutiny comes at a time when enterprises are increasingly dependent on hyperscaler ecosystems and bundled SaaS suites. If regulators determine that Microsoft's practices restrict competition, it could lead to structural changes in how enterprise software is packaged, priced, or integrated. The investigation signals growing regulatory attention on how dominant enterprise technology vendors use ecosystem leverage to expand market share. Bundling and licensing strategies, once seen as standard enterprise sales tactics, are now being evaluated through an antitrust lens. This outcome could influence not only Microsoft, but the broader cloud and SaaS market. Eric, with all of that, first question I have for you is, how much of Microsoft's growth in Azure and Microsoft 365 is driven by technical superiority versus licensing leverage?
I couldn't tell you how much of their growth, of Microsoft's growth, is driven by functional or technical superiority. I think, they do have an advantage that they are integrated to not just Azure, but you look at Power Apps and Power BI and Copilot and SharePoint and Microsoft Outlook and Office 365, all that stuff. I mean, companies that are Microsoft shops, they tend to prefer Microsoft for better or for worse, and they're more likely to benefit from these bundling practices. But having said that, I see why they're under regulatory scrutiny. This isn't the first time Microsoft has faced regulatory scrutiny for bundling. I know back 20 years ago or more, they had trouble. I don't know. I don't recall if it was in the European Union or in the United States or both, but one or both of those regulatory bodies pursued regulatory relief for the fact that they were bundling Windows with Internet Explorer. And so competitors in Internet Explorer was a internet browser at the time that was very popular. And there were other competitors that were creating other internet browsers that felt like they were unfairly cut out of the Windows and the Microsoft ecosystem, simply because Microsoft controlled the Windows side of things. And so I think they ended up having to unbundle that as part of the regulatory remediation back then. So this isn't the first time that Microsoft's fallen into this pattern. Microsoft's not the only one falling into this pattern. I know SAP is having issues in the EU for similar antitrust allegations. They're being sued by a business process mining software company called Celonis for allegedly locking out the Celonis business process mining technology, locking it out of the SAP software because SAP has their own business process mining software. So I think this is something that's going to play out in the coming years, maybe a decade or more. But I think it is something that I think this is the crack in the foundation of the monolithic ERP model. The fact that we can just bundle everything and be a one-stop shop to provide all the technology needs of an organization sounds good in theory. It drives up stock prices and profitability for the vendors. But what we're seeing here is regulatory bodies don't like it, largely because customers don't like it. So anyway, I'll be curious to see where this all plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to bundle my next two questions. They kind of go together here for this article. At what point does bundling become anti-competitive rather than customer convenient? And then with that, after all of that, how should CIOs think about optionality when entering a multi-year bundled agreement?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'll answer the second question first. The optionality thing is important because if I do bundle everything, I'm now double down and I'm more locked into this one vendor than I already was. So it could be a good thing if you're very confident that you love being a Microsoft shop in this example, and you're going to continue to be a Microsoft shop for years and years to come. But I think the problem with the space right now is it's changing so fast that we don't know. We don't know how relevant Microsoft is going to be in 5 or 10 years. We don't know how relevant SAP is going to be in the next 5 or 10 years. There's just too many upstarts and fast moving technology providers out there. And the landscape is shifting so quickly, especially with AI. It's creating much lower barriers to entry to create a software company. I mean, now would be an awesome time to start a software company. And I'm sure there's a lot of people sitting in their garages doing just that. And one of those competitors several of those competitors are going to be viable competitors for Microsoft and SAP in the future. We may not know who they are yet. So I think that's where the industry is going to head. So I think preserving your optionality, keeping your options open is something that's very important, knowing that what you know today is probably going to be obsolete in 2, 3, or 5 years. And then what was the first part of your question? Sorry.
At what point does it become anti-competitive behavior rather than customer convenient for bundling?
I'm sure the vendors would argue that it's customer convenience. I'm saving them money. They're going to buy all this stuff anyway. I'm just giving them a break on it. There's definitely a gray area there that only a regulator and the legal system can work out. I don't have a good answer for it other than I think what a regulator would say, or what an attorney might say, is that once you start undercutting to the point where you're losing money or you're getting a loss leader on certain technology just in the name of keeping out other players, that's where I think you cross a line into anti-competitive. But anti-competitive is also a very gray area, and that's something that's not cut and dry. So it is going to be fought in the court system, I imagine, for a while to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting to keep a pulse on that, especially in the future here. But I want to get into our next article, which is about why AI is not a necessarily cost-saving model in customer service. So this article challenges the common assumption that AI automatically reduces costs in customer service. While many organizations deploy chatbots, virtual agents, and generative AI tools expecting headcount reductions and efficiency gains, the reality is really more complex. AI often shifts costs rather than eliminating them, and it can introduce new operational, governance, and experience risks. According to this article, companies frequently underestimate the true cost of deploying AI in customer service environments. Beyond licensing fees, organizations must account for integration, data preparation, ongoing model training, governance oversight, security, and human escalation paths when AI fails. In many cases, AI handles simple inquiries but escalates more complex issues to human agents, increasing workload and complexity rather than reducing it. This article also highlights that poorly implemented AI can degrade customer experience, damage brand trust, and increase churn. Instead of serving as a pure cost-cutting tool, AI in customer service often becomes an investment in speed, availability, and personalization that requires careful design and long-term management. The overall key takeaway from this article is AI in customer service is not a plug and play labor replacement strategy. It's an operational transformation that introduces new cost structures and management requirements. Organizations that treat AI as strategic capability rather than a short term cost reduction tool are more likely to realize the sustainable value of it. Eric, with this, I'm just curious to your take if this is something that you hear a lot too, that you hear this misconception a lot. And then my other question with it is, why do executives continue to frame AI primarily as a cost-cutting initiative rather than a value creation tool?
Yeah, I know a lot of companies are struggling with this right now, and a lot of board of directors, a lot of boardrooms are having discussions around how can we get in on this AI thing to save money. And so I think a lot of it is coming from the top, and maybe in a slightly or a drastically unrealistic view of what AI could possibly do for your business. So I think a lot of it's being driven from the top. I think a lot of it's being driven by misunderstanding of what AI is and the level of maturity of AI. And I think the companies that are most successful, at least the ones we're working with, where we're helping a lot of clients with their AI initiatives now, the thing they all have in common, these more successful ones that are having successes with AI, is they are focused on overall value. They're not using it as a cost cutting measure. They're looking as a way to say, how can we take this great team we have and how can we scale those people to do more and to get more productivity out of them? I think that's the real play. I think the AI job loss and job displacement is probably a bit overstated, and I don't think anyone really knows anyway. So I definitely wouldn't want to assume it's drastically high or low in terms of what AI's impact is going to be on the job market. But I think it is a great opportunity to get more value out of people and to make people smarter and just be able to do their jobs better.
Yeah, absolutely. One question I have with this is, what are those hidden costs that organizations consistently underestimate when deploying AI in service operations?
I think probably the biggest thing is data quality. I mean, data quality is such an important part of AI. And a lot of organizations think that if I deploy this cool, sexy AI tool, then I'm going to save a bunch of money and I'm going to, it's going to work wonders. Well, it could longer term, but it's not going to short term if your data sucks and if you don't have good data. So having the right data model, the raw data that you plug into the AI tools, but also the data governance to make sure that the data you keep feeding the AI tool is accurate is important. It's just like, when you run reports now out of your core financial system or your ERP system, chances are pretty high you're getting some errors in there, and you have some people that are on the back side of things manipulating that data, cleaning it up, using spreadsheets outside the system to reconcile and fix data. So a lot of these data issues have probably been hidden from a lot of leaders, and they don't realize that the data was never good to begin with. You just had people that were finding ways to make do with what they had. Well, now you've got AI, which isn't smart enough to know yet that the data and the inputs it's getting sucks and it's not accurate. So it's going to respond accordingly, and it's going to use what it's given. So it's that garbage in, garbage out thought that you've got to take into consideration with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. My last question on this, Eric, in your opinion, when does AI improve customer experience versus when does it erode trust with customers?
I think when it's done right and you have factored in data governance and you've done thorough testing and you've set clear parameters and governance in place around the AI models, that's when you can actually build customer trust and be successful. But you're going to quickly erode customer trust if that data is inaccurate and if the AI agent is just adding another layer of perceived bureaucracy or a perceived middleman now that you've got to deal with an AI agent when you just want to talk to a person. It's sort of like when you call into the bank or you call into a business and you have to deal with a super annoying voice response thing on the phone. It's just like that. I mean, people will get frustrated if they have to push a bunch of buttons on a phone to get to talk to a person. It's going to be the same thing with AI agents. So I think that's just something we've got to be aware of and prepared for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting articles today, but I'm excited to get into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have Bonnie Tinder on the show, the CEO of Raven Intel. She's going to be on. We're going to talk about the top rated system integrators in the enterprise technology space. And we'll also talk about what some of the patterns are and the things you should be considering as you evaluate potential system integrators. So be sure to stick around for that. We'll bring her on the show to chat about that. And then later in the show, we're going to talk about SAP Rise and hyperscalers. So if you're looking to move to SAP S4HANA and you're part of the Rise program, you're considering Rise, we're going to talk about how hyperscalers fit into that and what you need to know about your options there. So be sure to stick around. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control. If you're leading a digital transformation or ERP initiative and you want to avoid the costly mistakes that most organizations make, that's where Third Stage Consulting comes in. We are an independent and technology advisory firm, meaning that we don't sell software, we don't take commissions from vendors. Our only job is to protect your interests and be on your side. We help executives and project teams plan, deliver, and recover digital transformations and ERP projects, reducing risk, improving adoption, and delivering real business value. If you want clarity before you commit to your digital strategy, or if something feels off track to you, feel free to reach out to us at thirdstage-consulting.com, and my team and I would be happy to help.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 262. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. This show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, which is an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys, and it's produced by Major Tom Productions. If you'd like to learn more about how to collaborate with us on this content or on this podcast and other content we create, you can reach out to us. I've included contact information below for Major Tom Productions, as well as my contact information as well, if you'd like to learn more about how Third Stage Consulting can help with your digital transformation. So one of the biggest things that make digital transformation successful is going to be the system integrator, the implementation technical partner that you work with. And this decision is arguably even more important than the software itself. But up until recently, it's been very difficult to know who the leading system integrators are, who are the high quality partners versus the ones that aren't as high quality. And there's just a lot of system integrators out there that aren't directly affiliated with software vendors, although they are partners of software vendors. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're all good. So the question then is, how do we know which ones are good, especially when we know that system integrators and vendors are going to curate and give us the most favorable client references? How can we get a broader data set to better understand who the best system integrators are, or whether or not our preferred or potential system integrator is going to be good for us? So to unpack this conversation and to get into more detail, more data behind satisfaction with system integrators, I want to bring on Bonnie Tinder from Raven Intel, which is a peer review site that it's almost like the Yelp of system integrators. So Bonnie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So you've been on this podcast a few times before. You and I have known each other a long time in this industry, and I would consider you a fellow maverick / renegade / disruptor in the industry, because you're doing something that in some ways is so crazy, but in other ways just so common sense-ish that no one had thought to do it until you did it. And that is to start a peer review website and a service for companies that are looking for system integrators and vendors. Tell us a little bit about Raven Intel, and maybe also tell us, like, how did you come up with this idea? Why'd you do it? What led you down this path?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And we think about our buying experience as consumers, out on say, Amazon. And if you're buying a $2 item, you are reading reviews. You're selecting a restaurant, it's particularly in a town that you might not be familiar with, you're looking at Yelp. So much of our consumer buying habits are based upon peer review. And yet, when we look at these multi-million-dollar complex projects that so many parts of the business hinge upon, prior to Raven, there was no way to really look and vet a partner. And so, 8 years ago, I started Raven Intelligence with this idea that I wanted to make it as easy to find a great partner as it is to find a great pizza spot or buy a good item on Amazon. And the difference is on Amazon, you can easily return your item if you don't like it. But it's much less of a return policy for a botched implementation. And we're talking about millions of dollars, not a couple of dollars. So it's a really important area to really make sure that you are selecting the right partner. Because Eric, as you mentioned, and as you see day to day, your partner is, and the team that you put in place is going to make or break your implementation and technology success.
So it's such an interesting thing, and that's funny to think about a return policy. What's your return policy for my digital transformation services? Do you have an exchange policy? It's funny to think about. But
Yeah.
why do you think that is? Like, why it is fascinating to think about how we can be buying a book for $10 and we obsess over reviews and comparing different books. But to your point, you spend millions of dollars on a system integrator, and sometimes you believe the marketing hype and you go for it. What do you think that is? Is that a organizational behavior sort of thing? Is it overconfidence? What causes that, do you think, just based on your experience?
Yeah. Well, when you're buying a partner or consulting work, you're really buying something that's difficult to touch and feel, right? You're buying hours, you're buying expertise. Whereas even with the software, you can put a box around what the software does. It's easy to demonstrate software. It's much more difficult to demonstrate a finished project, especially in the early stages of things. And so this idea that, I spent $1 million on my project and now it didn't meet expectations. The time has been invested, the resources have been invested, and it's very difficult to go back unless there's something, that's really obscure that happened that you can point to. You can't go back and undo. And that's why it makes it so important, Eric, to make sure that you're set up for success early. Or if you're early in a project and you spot those red flags that you're like, okay, we gotta change directions, like right now, like quit while we're ahead type of thing. You need to be able to quickly, course correct if for some reason the partner that you have is not going to be viable for the long haul.
Right. And just out of curiosity, tell us a little bit about your background, your upbringing in the industry that led you to this point where you started Raven Intel. I think the same year I started Third Stage, right? 2018 is when you started Raven, because I think we were comparing notes along the way as we were both getting started. But what led you up until 2018 when you started Raven Intel? What was your journey and how'd you end up here?
Yeah, well, I started out my career right out of college in implementation. The first job I had was implementing payroll for, at the time it was called Ceridian, now it's called Dayforce. And that was, and even in the 25 plus years that I've had in this industry, I look back, that still was the hardest job I ever had. Implementation is not for the faint of heart. It is a really tough road. On the other hand, it taught me a ton about how this whole implementation of software works and what was involved with it. That was the first parts of my career. I moved into other areas within the business and in marketing and sales. And so really got very acquainted working in these software vendors to see from a lot of different lenses what happens in that onboarding process, and where the customers were getting value or not value. In the late 2000s, I actually ran competitive intelligence for a software company. And that was really the point where I saw firsthand competitors that were failing, specifically in the ERP space with these massive implementations. And so I would do competitive intel, find all of these public failures, and have them illustrated and talk about why this software company was different than that on implementation. And what I realized is that the strength of implementations becomes a huge differentiator and a huge, I think, unique competitive trait if done well. And so I thought, hey, it's really hard to demonstrate when you do implementation well, because nobody says thank you for getting it right. I wanted to give partners a way that they could define how they were doing implementation and show the success through the absolute best content that a company can have, and that is in the voice of their customers. And so that's really what led me to start Raven in 2018 was, giving, I wanted to give these SIs and software vendors a way to really prove out that they were doing a great job during implementation and have some hard data in the voice of customers independently that would help them set themselves apart. From a competitive standpoint, I think it's the absolute, most important thing that a customer can make a decision on is tell me the success rate of other customers who have just gone through an implementation. That is a huge proof point as to what you're buying is going to be good or not.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I have a follow-up question for you. I'm going to ask you in just a moment on that too. But I want to turn to the audience here, say hello to a few people that are joining. Patrick is joining on LinkedIn, says hello, and you are live in Poland. Hello, Patrick, good to see you again. We have Lori joining from St. Paul in the U.S. Hello, Lori. Rob on LinkedIn from Atlanta. Thank you, Rob. You know some of these people? These names look familiar to you?
I do. Hi, Sue.
Sue from Wisconsin. Wow, you're bringing quite the fan base here to the show. Thank you.
I love it. All great implementers and titans in the tech industry. So glad to have them here.
Yeah, and we're going to tag more of these system integrators as we talk about them. We'll try to we'll tag them on LinkedIn and try and get them to jump in the conversation here as we give shout outs to some of them. Rashid from Morocco on LinkedIn. Thank you for being here today. I'd love to hear from the audience too. Just a quick question for the audience. I'd love to hear what you think the most important criteria is when you're thinking about a system integrator for your organization. What's the most important criteria? What are some of the pitfalls or lessons you've learned or things you look at when you're evaluating system integrators? I'd love to hear the feedback. So drop that in the chat. I'm going to come back to that here in just a moment to your responses on that. But Bonnie, you were talking about your journey and how you ended up starting Raven Intel, and you have an interesting background in competitive intelligence. And really, it seems like what you're doing is you're bringing some basic fundamental transparency to an industry that wasn't really raised on transparency. How did vendors and system integrators respond when you launched this platform in 2018, given that it wasn't a thing? This wasn't like just another peer review site. There wasn't any at the time. Were people open to it? Did they like it? Did they push back on it? Did it make them uncomfortable because they couldn't control the narrative? What was the response you got from the industry in general?
Well, my first year, most people wanted to run the other way.
Right.
Frankly, you want to review implementation? Great. Okay. Talk to you later.
No thanks.
So I would say the first reception was very cold, especially from the big GSIs and honestly the global software vendors as well. Initially, they were like, "Hey, we got that covered. No need to dig into our data here. We're our customers." And so I think initially that was it was a tough road. And so rather than going to the SIs themselves or the software vendors to say, "Hey, can you introduce me to your clients?" What we did is we just went straight to the clients. I mean, the clients were the ones who, had a story to tell. They were the ones who would be very forthcoming in terms of giving us reviews. And so our first, what I would say, our first 500 reviews were based on, our own guerrilla marketing tactics to just go straight to these software shows, talk to clients, with our, investigative hat on and get that feedback. Ours is an open site, so anybody can come in and write a review. Do we have to vet who is writing it? Of course, we don't post anything without knowing exactly who and vetting the company that is writing the review. But with that said, anybody at any time can come in and write a review. We're not gatekeeping any of the data. We don't lose reviews or anything like that. So our best data initially came directly from clients, and also doing all of the hard work and going directly to them and just asking them, hey, would you write a review? However, all of a sudden in like year 2, we had some of the very best SIs who really got it and understood the value of showcasing their customers on the site. They knew that it was easy for them to find great reviews, and they knew that was going to set them apart. So all of a sudden we had some early adopters who, and some of them are actually on this call right now, some of the SIs that were independent doing an amazing work for their clients that were running toward it. And I always say you can spot a great SI from a mile away, because they're the ones who are leaning toward transparency and toward getting customers to review them, versus the ones who say, oh, well, we want to protect our clients, or we do advisory work, so we can't get our clients to do reviews. I mean, it's a bunch of excuses as to why they can't get reviews, but I think that's just a mask for we're afraid what customers will actually say, and we don't want that public. So again, where we really started getting some great momentum is we found all of these SIs that were, and software vendors too, right, that really understood how powerful the voice of customers were, and were not bashful about getting their customers out and talking about their experience, because they knew overwhelmingly that it's positive. So shout out to the UKGs, the Dayforces, the Unit 4, the Smart Communications, right? Some of these vendors that were building ecosystems that wanted to showcase the great work their partners were doing, and were not afraid of transparency, because quite frankly, they knew that their clients were satisfied.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. And so you trigger a couple of questions or jog a couple thoughts in my head that I want to come back to in just a moment. Let me get to a couple audience things here real quickly too. LinkedIn, someone on LinkedIn, I don't see the names, says hello from Colorado, a fellow Coloradoan. I'm in Colorado as well, in Denver. And then I know, Bonnie, you didn't say this, but you're in Chicago. And here's a comment from someone who I know lives in Chicago. You two should know each other if you don't already. This is from Carmen on LinkedIn. Carmen says, this is why governance and guardrails is important. Love that you have a way to help clients deep dive into their own data, help them understand how their investments are being managed. And I assume it helps the vendors just as much, maybe even more. It might help the vendors, because now they get to see what do people think of our services. We have our own view, but what are they saying about us?
Well, and it's surprising how much during implementation the vendor does not really know, because it's not that they're not involved or not communicating with the client, but there's a lot of information that happens, especially from a sales perspective. You turn that account over to account management and to the implementation team. It's not that you're not wanting to be involved, but like after post sale, you're not intimately aware of what's going on. And this is a way for them to in a very independent way, make sure that, what the partners are delivering is quality work, because that reflects their brand as much as their software does.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Also want to say hello to Ken on LinkedIn, joining from North Carolina. Sanjay, I'm joining on LinkedIn, says good morning all. Good morning, Sanjay. And then Patrick on LinkedIn has a comment here. He says, in our program, and he's got a website here, In our program, we started to collect users' experience and reviews about published ERP systems, especially popular in Poland, which is where Patrick is from. It's difficult to convince users to share their opinion. How do you verify and how do you enhance users to share true opinions, not hate?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that's the tough thing about reviews. And you probably know this just from the way that you write them. If you have an amazing experience, you're going to quickly write about that. If you have a terrible experience, you're going to quickly write that. If it's like, if you're sort of neutral on it, and that's like, maybe in the 6 to 8 out of 10 range, I mean, you're not as likely to do a review because you're just like, eh. And so it's finding the broad sampling of information from the promoters down to the detractors, but also what's in between as well, because that gives you a real look at what the quality is, in general, is having the volume of reviews. And Patrick, you bring up the thing that is the most challenging thing about the reviews business is incenting a client to take 5 minutes to do a review. And so ways that we, or how should I say, ways that is, we increase the odds of that is when somebody who knows them and has a relationship with them is the one who asks them to do the review. And that is primarily the consultants. And so we have a lot of SIs that are part of the Raven program who actually bonus their consultants based on the number of reviews that they get as well as the quality, right? So that puts skin in the game for the consultants to make sure those reviews are complete. And when a consultant who's intimately aware of the experience during an implementation, when they're the ones doing the asking, the client is like 90% more likely to respond, as opposed to when it comes from some marketing email address, or definitely from Raven Intel that they may have not been familiar with. So the likelihood goes way up when it's the consultants asking the question, because there's something in it for the consultant to get reviewed. I mean, even incentives aside, consultants can use reviews to basically show the quality of work that they're delivering for clients. So getting skin in the game is a huge deal. And what does not work, number one is some spray and pray email from a marketing email address that, would you write a review? No, nobody does those. And then the second thing that it maybe works a little bit of the time, but we don't encourage it, is to bribe the client to do a review with like Amazon gift cards and things like that. First of all, it always goes to spam anyways. But the last thing that you want is like some paid for opinion. Nobody wants to read that. And so, I would say that, that's less of how our customers are coming to it. The last thing I do want to talk about this, because this is a big thing, especially in the world of AI, is how do you verify reviews? And that's a really important question. Every single review that we do has to have a work email address. We have to verify that work email address, so we don't do Gmails or something like that. And then we cross-reference that against LinkedIn as well before we can post anything. We do not post any of that PII data or anything like that, but we know every single review that's on our site.
That's great. Yeah, very good. And to the audience too, if you don't mind, keep the questions coming. I'm going to turn away from the questions from you just for a moment, because I want to get to some of Bonnie's categories here. But keep the questions coming, because there's some really good ones coming through the chat that I am going to get to here in just a moment. But before I do that, maybe Bonnie, if you could tell us, I know you and I have chatted about this in the past, and it's always good to get an update on the state of the market and the state of the industry year to year. And you have some broad observations based on some of the patterns you're seeing just across the board in general with the data. And so before we get into some of the highest rated system integrators, which is, I assume, a big part of what some people are waiting for us to get to here today, tell us a little bit, before we get to that, tell us a little bit about what are some of the general patterns that you saw in the data over the last year?
Yeah. So number one, high satisfaction correlates with high consultant quality. So if somebody, and one of the questions we ask, did you get the full value of what you thought with this project, right? Full value, that definitely correlates to a high satisfaction with, or high consultant quality. So how the consultant was rated, there's a correlation there. And not surprisingly, the people and the team dynamic are what I would say are number one telltale sign of a good consultant team, and your ability to realize value, right? Because they're going to be the ones that will help you through the change management that's so critical. They're the ones that you feel that, is responsive to your needs, is listening, all of those type of things. So it's a people equation, but there's a huge correlation between a firm that's getting a 4.8 or 4.9 out of 5 rating in consultant quality and the success that's delivered.
Right.
And number 2, I would say execution reliability is a differentiator. And, on time, on budget, while it doesn't, correlate, one-on-one to value delivered, it's important, right? Because typically firms who can deliver within the scope that was agreed upon are the ones that really can separate themselves. They're the ones who have scoped out the project correctly. They're the ones who put those sort of guardrails around the project, as opposed to going in knowing, oh, well, this time frame is going to change, 4 or 5 times as our change orders that we're going to, make all of our money on. So execution reliability is the differentiator. It is not everything, right? But if somebody is consistently delivering, half of the time on time, half of the time on budget, that's typically is spotting other failures as well.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah. And I would say number 3 is scale matters, but consistency matters more. And we give extra credit to the SIs that have a volume of reviews. And we have some firms, shout out to H Architect, 472 reviews, Ascend, 309 reviews, Stability, 250 or so reviews. The consistency that they have demonstrated through a quantity of different types of project is huge, right? Because scale matters, but consistency over time matters more. And those that have built up years and years worth of data with consistently high volume is impressive. It is more impressive than the ones that are 5-star with only 4 or 5 reviews. Those, to me, like, anybody can do that. It's the consistency. When you have 100+ reviews out there, that's a body of work that now is there's a methodology behind those reviews.
Right. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from the audience if you're surprised that the big names don't always rate the highest, because I think that's what you're saying too, is sounds like you want a blend of the best of both worlds, if you will. You want a partner in an organization that can scale with consistent, repeatable quality, but at the same time, it sounds like the hugest ones aren't necessarily the ones to do that most consistently. They might be able to deliver more projects, but I imagine their success rate, you get some diminishing returns there, I assume. Is that true? Or how would you compare like the bigger firms with the biggest firms? How would you compare like the quality or just the general patterns you see between them?
Yeah, there is absolutely zero correlation between name brand and success. So GSIs that, everybody knows, Big 6, Big 7, you've heard their name because they advertise at the airport. They're the ones who sponsor the rock band at your vendors' conferences. There is no correlation there between that brand and a consistency rate of success that we see in the reviews. And quite frankly, some of them are the ones who really shy away from getting reviewed because they don't want that customer experience seeing the light of day in a lot of cases.
Right. Good. Well, let's get into some examples then. You've pulled out some of the leading system integrators, the ones that have the highest ratings, and the most consistent, broadest rating. So you're not looking at SIs that maybe had 1 or 2 reviews that are 5-star. You're looking for the ones that had some substance and some repeatability, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, we can't even give metrics to firms that have less than 7 reviews. I mean, it just doesn't until they hit that magic number of 7 that we can't reliably come up with metrics for them. However, once they hit that, and the firms that we have are there's a baseline of 30 reviews that we have before any of these can even get a mention. It's that consistency, as I mentioned before, that we can confidently say, hey, we recommend these firms. And I want to make sure that, when I talk about these firms, awards are so difficult. They are so difficult because it really depends. I can't just give a single award for an SI. I mean, that would be like, it doesn't make sense because it's based on what industry, based on
geography,
geography, based on what software, based on what scope of project. Do you need managed services afterwards? So that's difficult to say. So I've alphabetized these. Please know that they're alphabetized. These are not in order of how, of anything other than alphabetical by name.
All right.
But let's start out. Let's start out with an A, Ascend, right? So this is a UKG focused powerhouse offering both client-side and consultant-led implementation. The data reflects deep specialization. They have over 300 reviews. They're at 309 right now. So kudos for that volume and consistency over time. They have a 9.7 out of 10 partner satisfaction. Their systems expertise 4.9, consultant quality of 4.9 as well. And they really combine specialization with scale and volume, which you can see here. So Ascend, awesome choice for UKG, particularly with client side as well. Lots and lots of client side work that they've done. The second one, and Eric, do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, let me ask you a couple questions there then. So and this goes back to the comment you just made right before you got into the discussion here of Ascend. You were saying that it'd be impossible to say, who are the best ones or the best one, because there's so many different categories and subcategories you'd have to look at in terms of software, geography, industry, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Where would you say in this case? So if I'm looking at Ascend and I know I'm implementing UKG, where would they be a best fit? Like, could you give us an example of how, like, what category, what box would I fall into that would say Ascend would probably be a really good fit for me, other than implementing UKG?
Yeah. So, I mean, their specialization is in mid-market. It's with workforce management. It's with, if you need client-side resources, as well as the ability to, handle complexity, especially, within the mid-sized enterprise. They're a great bet there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay. All right. So that's
North America.
North America. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So congratulations to Ascend, being one of the top rated ones here. And I'm tagging, and I'll drop in the chat here the names in case you miss it. I'll try to keep up here as we're going through it, just to drop in the chat for you.
You can read it, by the way. Any that I'm mentioning, you can read all of their reviews out on ravenintel.com and just look them up. And don't take my word for it. Take their customers' word, and you can see all of the reviews right there.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because Ken from LinkedIn said he joined a few minutes late. And where do we find the reviews? And that's probably something I should have asked you in the intro. It's ravenintel.com, right? RAVEN.
Yep. And you can search my software ecosystem and go or by any of these partners' names.
And this is all free data, by the way, right? I can go out there and just review it. I don't have to pay you to go see the data.
Not at all. Not at all. This is designed for a software buyer who's looking to implement.
Yeah, interesting. Very cool. Okay, so we talked about Ascend. Who's next on your list of
alphabetical? H-Architect. H-Architect brings cross-platform depth across ecosystems like Dayforce, as well as UKG. They offer advisory services as well as full implementation services. They do workforce software as well. So they handle multiple streams of HCM software. What distinguishes them is scale, right? They have the most reviews out on Raven Intel, 472, which is the highest volume, with consistently positive satisfaction scores as well. So they're with that many reviews, 9.6 satisfaction score. They are 76% on time, 80% on budget, which is well above our industry average, which hovers around like 60%. They are 4.9 in consultant quality. So where Architect is really best suited is to come in, especially if you are early in the process and not sure what software that you are choosing. They can offer advisory services as well as the implementation as well. So Architect.
I'm here with Bonnie Tinder. We're talking about the industry's leading system integrators, as well as what you need to know when you're evaluating potential system integrators. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be right back with more Transformation Ground Control.
When the soul of the city was laid to rest, and the night's forgotten.
If you're about to embark on the jungle of digital transformation, check out my new book, Welcome to the Jungle. It's a book that just came out in late 2025. It's my second book, and it's a book that focuses on digital transformation failure case studies and talks about the lessons and takeaways from that. It's 300 pages packed of all the lessons and things that I've learned from having been an expert witness in lawsuits related to digital transformations, and also with our team helping clients recover some of their failed projects. I've included as many lessons as I could possibly fit into one book here. You can read this book. You can order it anywhere in the world in hard copy format, which is this format here. You can get it in paperback. You can also get it electronically as well. Scan the QR code right here or go to the links below for your copy. Hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 262. My name is Eric Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And if you'd like to learn more about how we can help you with your digital transformation, be sure to reach out to me. Third Stage Consulting is the firm I work for. We can help you from an independent perspective, help you de-risk and manage your implementation. We can help you recover your project if you're off track. And we do that across all different ERP and enterprise tech platforms. So we're in the middle of a conversation here with Bonnie Tinder. We're talking about the leading system integrators, who are the best rated ones, and how to evaluate potential system integrators as well. Just to understand here, one thing that stood out here is, you were talking about the verified reviews, and just the fact that you've got 472 is impressive, and you've got some quantitative data here, which is super helpful. If I were to go in, if I were to go into your site in general and look at some of the individual comments that people make, do you have certain themes like qualitatively that sort of jump out as far as what people are saying and thinking and talking about when they leave these reviews?
Yeah, we do. And so we ask the customer to talk about the strengths of the partner, how they chose their partner, as well as would they hire this partner again? Are they highly likely to do that? Are they likely, or will they shop around? And so consistently, the rehire rate of H-Architect is extremely high. And several of these customers, we see repeat projects. So we may have gotten a review 2 years ago from a customer that has now done a new module implementation or needs optimization help. They'll rehire a partner, and that rate of rehire is a significant calling card for a great consulting firm. And again, we every quarter with these SIs that actually work and partner with Raven, we will consultatively interpret their voice of customer and tell them, here's where you're strong, here's where you have some opportunities, and what your customers are saying your value prop is. And so we analyze all this data and give it back to these firms so that they know where they're outperforming as well.
Right. Okay, well, that's helpful. So we talked about H-Architect, we talked about Ascend. Who else is amongst the highest rated SIs?
Another H, Hybridge Solutions, now an Argonaut company. They were recently purchased last year. Hybridge has built a reputation as a leader with the UKG healthcare vertical. They have managed successfully many healthcare implementations of great size and complexity. They're the go-to in this area. And their numbers are compelling. 9.8 partner satisfaction, 9.5 project satisfaction, 8.9 software satisfaction, among the highest in this cohort. And typically we see, partners are rated more favorably than the software vendors in most cases. It's just sort of the nature of the beast. And but consistently Hybridge, even with that challenge, is rating 8.9 software satisfaction. So they're really able to help overcome any, hiccups or any challenges with the software as well, which is great. 81% of the time they're on budget. They have 67 reviews, and they really have demonstrated incredibly strong execution in complex healthcare environments. So I would say those were the differentiators.
Very interesting. Very cool. Well, congratulations to Hybridge for high ratings there. I'm going to save the next one for a second because I think, and you can correct me when we get to it, I think the next one you're going to go to, because I did see a leaked copy of Bonnie's list, by the way, so I know what she's going to say next. Yeah. I know which one she's going to get to next. I think that might be the biggest one, the biggest name on the list. Is that true? I don't want you to say it yet, but just to build the suspense, is that one of the biggest or one of the bigger names on the list?
It is the bigger. It's a bigger name because they offer a full breadth of solutions outside of implementation.
Okay. So a big name SI did make the list, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But in the meantime, let me get to a couple more questions here because there's been a lot of really good ones here. Here's a question that builds on something Patrick asked earlier. Is either Patrick or Ken, I can't remember. One of the audience members asked a similar question, but Sue on LinkedIn says, how do you make sure you have a balanced review and not only positioning the good reviews?
Yeah, Sue, it's a great question. And we always say, if we do not have any reviews with negativity, somebody's hiding something, right? Or we just don't have enough of a quantity, because implementation, as Sue knows from her experience with implementation, it's a no matter what, and even the best of times, it's challenging. So how do we look at a balanced scorecard and not just the positive, right? We ask about, were there integrations which were problematic? What were the lessons learned? So that's a big question, lessons learned. We don't ask, what was positive? We ask what's this partner's strengths, but we also ask what's the lessons learned. And that becomes then a place where you really get that free form emotion that comes out with clients. And if they have a bone to pick, boy, that's where we're going to see it, is the quote unquote lessons learned.
Right. Very interesting. Here's another question. I think you already alluded to this a bit, but we'll ask it again. This is from Ken on LinkedIn. Is there a top 10 list of most successful system integrators? I think that's what a lot of us want. We just want to be able to say, just tell me who the best one is.
Right, exactly. Magic wand. Again, that top 10 would have to depend, right?
Yeah.
Depend on the software, depend on the scope of work, depend on your industry. So sure, there's always a top 10, but you got to have context on that.
Right. And here's an interesting comment that I really like. I'd be curious to get your feedback on this, Bonnie. This is from Precious on LinkedIn. Precious says, greetings from Ghana. And she talks about business process understanding. Given my background in ERP and process transformation, I will advise you to evaluate business process understanding if they can challenge business assumptions intelligently. And this brings up a bigger point, even beyond what she's saying here. This is a great point, because she's not talking about technology. She's not talking about how well does the partner understand technology, but how important is that operational understanding, the change management, the training, all the stuff that's not directly related to the technology. How important is some of the stuff that Precious is talking about here?
Yeah, it's a huge part of the equation, right? Because if you don't know how to ask questions and land on how can I help my client rethink a process, all of the great technical expertise is irrelevant. So you got to have both. And I think you see that demonstrated with when vendors, or the SI, that get high marks, there's a couple of things that really demonstrate the process transformation expertise. And that is, the questions about what was the implementation process like? Was there change management involved, and how was that, as well as the area of value delivered. So when somebody says they got full value delivered, chances are the overall business process was handled effectively as well.
Right. There's another question from Themba Lane. That's a cool name. Themba from South Africa says, pre-project implementation engagement with clearly defined requirements is a key for successful project delivery, rather than just diving in without doing due diligence. Clear requirements, sound business case are very important.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And we asked the question, how many change orders did you have? And that's the telltale. They had multiple change orders because a SI missed, needs during the scoping process or during the discovery process. That's the telltale that somebody just, rushed through to get a quote done.
Right. Absolutely. And then here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn. What statistical thresholds are needed before drawing conclusions about an SI? I know you said, 7 is a magic number to prove you've got scale and repeatability. Are there any other statistical thresholds you look at without getting all statistically nerdy on us or anything?
Yeah. I mean, that 7 is a big deal, but then we look at all the telltale markers of success, right? And, when we ask a customer to review a project, it's not just a 30-second, 1 out of 5 stars. Although, man, that would make our job really easy. I mean, we have, close to like 60 questions that we're looking at the answers for to draw a conclusion about that. So when we have 7 customers who have gone through an implementation, that gives us not just 7-star ratings, it gives us, hundreds of points of context that we can really look at what the voice of customers are. I would say, our peer reviews, can you determine if a SI is right just based on reading reviews on Raven? No, I wish. That'd be nice. That would make it a lot easier for people to make decisions, right? You also have to really go with some of the things that you can't put a box around or data around. And that is, how well do you feel this consulting firm matches your culture internally? Can you work with this team? Do you like this team? would you go out and have a beer with this team? If you can't, if you don't like them, it's not going to get better during implementation. And so I think statistically, you want to look at past history, and reviews are a great way to do that. But you still have to run an RFP or a selection process that gives you, you got to kick the tires and really know who your team is going to be, that you can't read from, some reviews.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Ken on LinkedIn asked, do you ask those people process side questions in the surveys? So
Yes.
beyond their knowledge of technology and some of the other things you've talked about?
Absolutely. Implementation process is one of them. Was there change management involved with the engagement, as well as consultant quality, which, also talks about and recognize consultant as well. So we ask for a name. So when somebody is named as the recognized consultant, chances are that person delivered some really, really great things.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Ken, as a follow-up on LinkedIn, says they all seem to know how to plug the light bulb in. We want to know which ones best understand how the business rooms need to be lit for optimal business outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Very well said, Ken. So thanks for that.
I like that.
Yeah. All right. So I interrupted you, Bonnie. You were in the middle of going through the highest rated SIs, and I stopped you mid-list here. But who's next on our list here?
Okay, so you teed it up, Eric. So RSM, and they really stand out for the breadth of services that they offer. So they implement UKG, Dayforce, Workday, Microsoft Dynamics. They have a practice area that spans multiple types of projects and multiple software, while also delivering tax assurance and advisory service that are beyond the HR tech as well. So they sort of do it all. In addition to the advisory, what they're getting on the implementation quality is also incredibly high. So delivery sits at 73% on time, 76% on budget, supported by 4.9 out of 5 ratings in consultant quality and responsiveness. They have 158 reviews, so they've demonstrated consistency over time. Their Dayforce practice is really firing on all cylinders as well. I think their biggest differentiator is the enterprise level scale that they have, and the ability to do multiple types of advisory work as well as the implementation.
Yeah, very good. They had a lot of reviews, very high ratings, which is impressive. To your point earlier, I know you said 7 is the magic number, but some of these guys that you're talking about here have hundreds, they're in the hundreds. And I think that's very impressive to show that it's not just a flash in the pan or just the happiest customers necessarily that are putting in reviews. Do you, just out of curiosity, it came to mind actually when you were talking about HR Architect, because they had almost 500 reviews, but do you find that the vendor supports and buy-in to the whole transparency in the review process, is that a critical success factor for you getting the data you need and to get their customers to actually submit reviews? You were talking about relationships and how important that is to get the reviews, but do you just find that certain vendors are like, yeah, I'm in, I want to get as many customers as I can, and I'm going to help you get more reviews?
Yeah, for sure. And there's others that will say, oh yeah, we're all about reviews, and then they will run the other way as well, or just never call you back. So the best vendors and the best vendor partner ecosystems are the ones that are actually managing the partner quality using these external reviews. And it really does help when the vendor is on board with having the SIs getting reviewed. And in a lot of cases, these software vendors will look to us to say, for their annual partner awards, give us the Raven data and help us make the decision who these awards should go to. And that independence is a big deal. And so, I mentioned UKG on some of these. UKG is a software vendor that really wants to make sure their partners are delivering consistent quality. So they do look at all of these metrics, and they do award based on this as well, which is a big deal. Dayforce is another one. And we've seen other, pockets of, SAP success factors, And they're also embracing this concept as well, smart communications, Unit 4. And so I think more and more software vendors, I think as soon as they learn, hey, this is a way that we can really showcase the great work that we're doing. This is not punitive in any sense. It really all of a sudden the light bulb goes off, and now all of the SIs want to participate in this because it really helps them showcase what they're doing.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Who's next on the list here?
Okay, so we're down to S, stability. Stability is has delivered some of the strongest overall scores in the UKG ecosystem. So they also are focused on UKG implementations, and consistently we see 5-star reviews. With 230 reviews. Again, they have a 9.9 partner satisfaction, which is the highest in this group. And you talk about repeat customers and repeat success. That's what we see consistently from Stability. They are 83% on budget, which is almost 20% higher than the industry average. 4.9 on all qualitative execution metrics. And that is things like consultant quality, responsiveness, implementation process, as well as the software expertise. So, again, it's the consistency and it's the high degree of ratings. I always, tell them, hey, get some bad reviews in here because this is too good. But on the other hand, it's hard to find a customer who has had any negativity there. So Stability, huge player within the UKG partner ecosystem in North America, both across core HR as well as workforce management.
What's interesting about Stability and some of the other ones you mentioned is how the partner satisfaction can be so high when the software satisfaction isn't bad. 8.6 software satisfaction isn't terrible, but it's just interesting to see. And to your point, I mean, you can have a successful, positive experience with an SI, even if you don't like the software as much as you like the partner. And it seems like, I don't know if you've seen that before. Have you seen a disconnect between software satisfaction and then the actual implementation satisfaction?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we see all the time where we see the partner rated like a 9 and the software vendor rated a 6 or sometimes a 0. Right? If it was a really rocky implementation with the client saying, "Hey, we would have disbanded this project if it weren't for the partner." We've also seen the inverse as well, where the software is rated well, but the partner is rated poorly the first time around. And then we see some projects that were, retreads. And so they go from one SI to another SI, and the second SI gets high ratings and said, is then, the reason that the project was successful in the end. So we see a lot of that as well.
Yeah. The other thing too, and this is just more for the audience's edification, is, on the surface, if you look at some of these on time and on budget percentages, a lot of these that we've talked about so far are in that, 70 to 80% on time, on budget range. And on the surface, you think, wow, that's, it could be better, right? You could be a lot better. But actually, those numbers are exceptionally high, I would say. I mean, based on my experience, I'd say it's usually the opposite. Usually for most SIs, if I were to just generalize with no data to back me, which is the exact opposite of what you do, Bonnie. But if I'm just speaking from experience, I would say it's probably the inverse. It would be the average on time, on budget, which would be like 70 to 80% are not on time or on budget across the industry. So, and again, don't quote me on that because I have no data to back it. But I think these numbers from what you're going through are extremely high, higher than you may even think on the surface here.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And I would say if we're looking at the averages for a full ERP implementation, not just HCM, if we look at and take out the reviews just for ERP, those plummet, like they're half.
Right. Yeah. Good point. Yeah. If you're talking HCM versus full blown ERP, I imagine. That's a great point of clarification. I would imagine those numbers look a lot different.
Yeah.
So we've got, and speaking of on time, on budget metrics, this next one you're going to get to has even higher on time, on budget percentages. So tell us about this next one on your list.
Yeah, so Talent Team is an SAP SuccessFactors SI, and what makes their projects even more unique is they are really focused on talent management and learning. Their delivery metrics lead this cohort. They're 9.7 in partner satisfaction, 86% on time, 87% on budget, with over 71 reviews. And their expertise is in Europe, although they've opened up a North American practice as well. But Talent Team, has really solid reviews, and particularly in talent management, learning, performance and goals and things like that. They're a leader with SAP SuccessFactors.
Very good. Yeah, that's very, very impressive. And then last but not least.
Yes. So Zalaris, and Zalaris is, it stands out for their global expertise in payroll, and particularly in APJ, right? So Australia, New Zealand, they have that niche that is so important to look for if you are doing an implementation in that area of the world. I had a call with a customer from Australia, and they were very specific about looking for somebody that had a footprint and local boots on the ground in Australia. Zalaris was an easy choice there. So they, rated really well by customers. I would recommend them particularly for, the payroll piece of things as well as the HR.
Yeah, very interesting. So when you look at all these leaders in the space, and I've tagged them all or mentioned them all in the comment below. And if you don't see them now, you'll see them shortly after this airs. But what are some of the common traits of the highest rated SIs? I think you alluded to a little bit of it as you're going through, but maybe just if you were to summarize, what are the things that make these the highest rated SIs?
Yeah, they scope realistically. So they say no when necessary. And they're also ones that aren't going to lose a relationship over a change order. And I think those are the SIs that really impress me, where they sort of have skin in the game as well and are flexible with as needs change, and they always do. So, but they scope realistically and they take the time to do a proper discovery. Number two, they avoid over customization, knowing that that's going to be costly to support over time. They're the ones who really help the customer think through any customization and help dissuade them from overly customizing their solution. They maintain continuity of key resources. So we look at the team churn numbers. How many times did the team turn over during the course of a project? We want to see low numbers there. If they're constantly, swapping in and out resources, that usually creates knowledge gaps, inconsistency, and customers hate that. So they're the ones who don't swap out resources. And they're certainly not the ones that bait and switch, with the experienced team during the sales process and then swap them in for the JV team once the deal closes.
Right.
And I think they're the ones who will help escalate risks early instead of hiding them. They're the ones who can help the customer know what they don't know about something that's going to snowball and be really painful if it's not addressed early. And so they will spot those risks. They'll mention them. They'll get them all on the table and make sure that, they address things before they snowball. So, I mean, they're really going to behave in general, just in general, the best partners are behaving like partners and like an extension of the team of the customer and not order takers.
Very interesting. Okay, good. And then when you look at the lower rated engagements, which we didn't get to that today, and we're not here to bash on the lowest rated SIs. But when you look at SIs that didn't make the list, or maybe SIs that are outliers in the other direction without the strong positive reviews that you just went through, what are some of the warning signs or patterns or themes you see in those reviews?
Yeah. Senior team sells the deal, junior team delivers it, right? That's a pattern with the global SIs, where they will bring out the really senior, speakers for the sales process, and then swap them out many times with offshore resources when they learn that they won the project. So that's a big thing, is just maintaining the consistency of team is not there. They underestimated the change management effort. They're sometimes the ones who want to be really cost competitive, and so they reduce the change management hours, and so their proposal looks less, and a customer goes with it, and then all of a sudden they make up all the difference and more once the customer's in process. So change management is a big deal. Make sure that you pad your proposal with that, or pad your potential budget with enough money for change management. High consultant turnover mid-project. And this sometimes points to the firm itself churning out resources. Maybe they're laying people off. And you see that, now, right, in the dawn of AI, where it seems like every company is having layoffs. You want to make sure that your team isn't constantly being brought in and out. That is one of the biggest things that smells failure for spells failure for these implementation projects, is when you have a project lead, both from the SI as well as the customer, that keeps on moving, because there's that cohesion is so important.
Right.
And I would say, the last thing is just a lack of clarity on roles between client and SI. So that communication clarity is important. What is your job? What is my job? What is the team's job? And being very clear on who does what, because when that is gray, and then all of a sudden something doesn't get done, it's like, there's a finger pointing type of thing. That was not good expectations that were set up front. So it's the one that is able to really define clarity on who's who in the zoo and what they need to be doing during a project.
Right. Yeah. Very cool. And then lastly, just looking at broader patterns, then what are some of the ways that organizations can use this data that you have on your site to de-risk their overall transformation?
Yeah. I would say the voice of customers speaks volumes. See what other customers are saying. You're going to get references from the SI one-on-one that you're going to talk to and have a phone call with or a Zoom meeting with. And that's really good. That's really good. Ask them the hard questions, but you need more than one, and you need to find more than just what your SI or your vendor is giving you in terms of references. Because you don't want just the cherry pick stuff. Go out and read reviews, because that's a way to have those independently vetted for you, in addition to your own checking. Go to conferences and your local industry networking meetings. Ask other customers that are there about their experiences. Try and find, sometimes it's like a needle in a haystack, but find those one-on-one sidebar conversations, and get the feedback from other customers as well. And I would say, pure data does not replace due diligence, right? So you have to still do your own homework in terms of your selection process, but it certainly can help sharpen it. And so, it really use the reviews that are available to help validate your what your gut is telling you, because if you feel, hey, this team really connects with my project and with my culture internally, and in addition to that, a whole bunch of other customers have been satisfied with them as well, that's the green light versus, hey, I don't see any reviews for this vendor. I've never heard of them. And, they were just sort of, so, but they're cheap. Let's just go with them, right? That's red flags all over the place. Or, hey, I've heard of this big company that's going to, promise the world and all of these great things about a digital transformation. But, I don't really have a good feeling for other customers' experience because I haven't been able to get that. Red flags.
Right. Or I like these guys because they're telling me what I want to hear, not what I need to hear, which is another.
That's right. Or nobody got fired for choosing, big company, insert name here. And maybe nobody got fired, but their project wasn't successful either. So.
Yeah. And I would argue they actually did.
Probably. Yeah.
But what's funny or what's interesting is you're saying that is nobody ever got fired for hiring fill in the blank. I would say that mentality would not apply to any of these, maybe RSM, just because they are a bit bigger and people use them for accounting too, which I think sometimes the accounting firms or the audit firms, I think create this false sense of security that like, oh, they also do accounting and audit, or they are our auditors in some cases. So their practice over here that does ERP or HCM or whatever must be just as good. And that's not the case. But I would say, most of these names are not household names, the ones that you just talked about, these highest rated ones. Those, other than RSM, I don't know that a lot of people have heard of a lot of these guys.
No, and honestly, that's why I want to start this. That's why I started Raven, because nobody had heard of them, and and yet they were delivering amazing value, and customers were like thrilled with them. And it's like I wanted everybody to know about them. Maybe they didn't have the marketing dollars to sponsor the rock band, but they were the ones that just consistently delighted clients, and that's what you want to find.
Yeah,
big names don't mean anything.
Yeah, the ones that are below the radar, they're actually investing in delivering better, not bringing
$1,000,000%, $1,000,000%. And you want to, it's easy to see I hate to say it, the old boys network, right? Still going strong, right? Where your salesperson is going to walk in the biggest vendor here. That's not the best way to select a partner. You want the partner that is going to be a good fit for you, because you're going to have to live with them day to day. And, not the one that just bought your sales rep the biggest, steak dinner or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, here's a comment that I think brings us all full circle and sort of puts a bow on everything you just said. And thank you for staying long, Bonnie. This is a great conversation. I always say we'll try to keep it around an hour, and here we are, we're past an hour, and we're already out of time. But this comment from LinkedIn is a really good one. It says, just a comment from one of the first questions or topics you covered, Eric. While recommendations and recognition from a global software vendor SI carry meaningful credibility and often considered by buyers, independent and candid customer reviews ultimately have greater influence. Organizations want to hear directly from their peers about real implementation experiences, what worked, what didn't, what value they got, etc. Most SIs can provide curated project references, but independent customer feedback offers a level of authenticity and transparency that buyers can, and then whoever it is ran out of space. So
they couldn't have written it better.
Yeah. I was like, how are you typing that comment and talking at the same time, Bonnie? I don't know how you had time to put that comment in, because it sounds like something.
Right. It's Bonnie Bot.
Right.
My AI.
Your AI agent is listening in and commenting on your behalf here. But no, that's a great comment. And I apologize, I can't see the name of the person who posted that on LinkedIn, but thank you for the great comment there. And that's a great place to leave it. So ravenintel.com is where we can go see your reviews, and you can search and sort, and you can look at all sorts of data there. How many, you might've said this before, and if you did, I apologize. I don't remember, but how many SIs or vendors are on your site that have reviews on your site? 200,
a little over 200. We have over 4,000 reviews to look at across 7 software ecosystems. So lots of data there.
Very cool. Thank you, Bonnie. That was a great conversation. And thank you to the audience for the great questions as well. We had some really good, insightful comments and thoughts and questions there. So really appreciate that. We've got a lot more to cover. We're going to dive into this conversation a bit more detail with Bonnie. And we're going to bring Darian back on the show and talk about Bonnie's conversation that we just had in a bit more detail. And we're also going to get into SAP Rise and talk about some of the nuances of the hyperscaling aspect, the cloud hosting aspect of SAP and S/4HANA implementations. So be sure to stick around. We've got a lot more to cover. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm Greg Benton. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Third Stage Consulting. And if you are embarking on your digital transformation journey or in the middle of that journey in 2026, you're going to want to see our digital transformation report. This latest edition really dives into a lot of the key trends that we're seeing in the marketplace and the ecosystem right now. It also highlights a number of the things that are happening with AI being an important component and integral part of the ERP systems that are leading the way right now. Also, the shift toward composable and best-of-breed cloud solutions is really accelerating the decline of monolithic ERP replacement. The opportunity to download the report is found at thirdstage-consulting.com. And you'll also find other tools that will help you in the initiatives and the business planning that you're doing for 2026. Don't leave phase zero without it. Reach out today.
I want to encourage you to read our Guide to Organizational Change Management. It's a free report or free guide that we published. It's one that I actually wrote that talks about best practices and lessons learned as it relates to change management. So as you know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of stuff related to the human sides of change, organizational change management, including training, communications, org design, all kinds of stuff as it relates to change management. So if you're trying to learn more about change management, or you're looking for more direction and ideas on how to get started on your change management strategy and your overall journey, be sure to check out this guide. You can read it by scanning the QR code on the screen in front of you, or in the links below for this particular podcast episode. You can find a link to take you to the page that will allow you to register to go ahead and download that and read it for free. So be sure to check it out. It's the Guide to Organizational Change Management, written by yours truly. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 262. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. And Darian, we just had Bonnie on the show talking about some of the reviews and rankings from her from her website, Raven Intel, and we talked about some of the highest rated system integrators, some of the patterns she's seeing. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, I thought it was a great conversation. I think she's been on the podcast before too, and I always find what she does super, super interesting and probably helpful to so many different companies out there. I have a couple follow-up questions though for you, Eric, from this conversation. One being on SI versus software accountability. For you, can a strong SI compensate for a poor software fit, or how do you think that works?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I alluded to this a little bit when I was commenting on how the satisfaction with the system integrators in most of these cases that we discussed here today, their ratings were higher than their satisfaction ratings with the software. And I think that was very telling because, first of all, you have to assume you're not going to be super happy. You're not going to be 100% happy with whatever software you buy. And that's true whether it's SAP, Microsoft, Oracle, Workday, doesn't matter. You're just not going to be fully 100% satisfied because it's impossible that software or any one software is going to satisfy all of your needs the way it was built. It's going to work maybe 70, 80% of your operations if you're lucky, but you're going to have that 10 to 20% or more that doesn't quite fit, and you've got to figure out what I'm going to do about it. And that what am I going to do about it is what, in my opinion, separates the strong SIs from the weak, because the weak SIs can build software. I mean, I don't think it's very rare that we come across a system integrator where they just don't know what they're doing. They don't know the product. You do see it occasionally. You get junior resources or people that aren't yet certified, but for the most part, generally speaking, most consultants and most SIs know the software. That's not the problem. The problem is, do you understand and can you understand a client's unique business? And can you get outside the box of the way technology works and think about how I'm going to connect the dots between the two? Because too often technical consultants lead with technology, and when the technology doesn't fit, doesn't work, they don't know what to do. And they oftentimes will just try to force fit it anyway, or try to convince the client that they should just use the software the way it was built. And sometimes it works okay, but most of the time it doesn't. So I think that's the key, is how do you navigate that uncertainty and the mismatches between software and your business?
Yeah, absolutely. And then one last question I want to ask from this conversation is about consultants on these projects. How does consultant turnover create hidden risk on these massive projects?
Well, you get a lot of lost knowledge. So obviously, you've got rework you've got to do. You've got knowledge transfer, the loss of that tribal knowledge. You're not starting over necessarily, but you've got a lot of catch up to do every time you bring on a new consultant. Having said that, though, I would not suggest that consulting turnover is not important, but a way you can mitigate some of the downside risk of the inevitable consultant turnover that will happen to some degree at some point on the project. The way around that is just to make sure that you document and use AI and other documentation tools to make sure that you have everything centrally located and captured. And I would argue it shouldn't be the SI capturing all that stuff. It should be you, the customer. If you're a customer, if you're a leader, you should build a governance process where you actually have ownership of and access to all the work in progress, the meeting notes, the transcripts, all that stuff. But too often organizations are sort of at the mercy of their system integrator. And then when the system integrator asks consultants to quit, then they're in a bind because now they're double paying for now bringing on a new consultant. So you can mitigate some of that by making sure you've got strong governance and documentation in place. And a lot of times that's what we do when we help our clients set up their PMO, their internal PMO. And that's a way to mitigate some of that risk. So it is disruptive. That's how it's disruptive, but there are ways to mitigate some of the downside risk.
Absolutely. Well, what a great conversation today. I always love when she comes on. I feel like she gives a lot of great insight because she has so much insight from her community as well.
Yeah, she's been doing it a long time and running this company for several years now. So she's got, 4,000 reviews and data points that she's looked at over the years. So definitely a lot to learn there. So appreciate having her on. And I know we talked a bit about SAP earlier in the episode, as well as in our conversation with Bonnie. We're going to talk about SAP some more and talk about SAP Rise. One of the newer ways that SAP is trying to convince ECC customers to move to S4HANA is to bundle everything into a single contract and make it easier, kind of a one-stop shop to do everything through SAP to make that migration as seamless as possible. Sounds good in theory, but it's not always that easy. In fact, it's rarely that easy. And there are nuances that are really important to understand in terms of how you interact with hyperscalers and just trying to understand and determine what the best route is for whether you want to use AWS or Azure, or if you want to use SAP for your hosting needs. So we're going to talk about that here in this recent YouTube video that I published, and then we'll come back and chat about it here in just a second. So let's roll the clip. So SAP Rise is actually a very smart decision by SAP. It's a way that they can market an easy and fast migration to S4HANA. And what it essentially is a way to package together and bundle a bunch of SAP offerings all in one contract to make it easier for you. It typically includes SAP S4HANA Private Cloud Edition. It includes managed services. It includes managing the technical infrastructure. And it also includes commercial packaging. So it's a way to reduce the friction and to give you one single throat to choke when moving forward with your SAP migration. But what SAP doesn't tell you is that when you move forward with SAP Rise, you're not only having SAP manage a lot of these moving parts for you, but you're also giving up a lot of control, negotiating leverage, and limitations on future decisions that you might have to make as it relates to your overall SAP deployment. In other words, SAP, in the case of SAP Rise, controls infrastructure choices and escalation paths and other aspects that you may want to have control of internally. So Rise is less about the cloud or specific infrastructure that you might use to host S4HANA, but it's more about who controls that infrastructure and that environment going forward. Now, to give you some context of what other customers are doing in the SAP space, I recently ran a poll on LinkedIn to find out what SAP customers are using in terms of Rise. Are they using Rise on the SAP infrastructure? Are they using another hyperscaler like AWS or Azure? Or are they still undecided or trying to figure out what they're going to do longer term? And what the survey found is that 43% of organizations are using SAP Rise on SAP's infrastructure. 23% are using SAP Rise on the AWS infrastructure. 9% are using it on the Azure infrastructure, and 26% are still trying to decide which path to move forward with. So for the time being, the number one category, the number one response is that most are using SAP Rise on SAP's infrastructure. But what I want to talk about here today is the dark side of moving forward with that option compared to some of the other options you might have within your SAP migration. So in the quest to move more of their customers from ECC to S/4HANA, SAP has approved two major options you have when moving forward with your cloud migration. The first is SAP hosted infrastructure. The other is using a hyperscaler of your choice, most notably AWS and or Azure. And this may sound like a techie sort of decision, a techie conversation, but it's really not. This is a strategic leadership conversation around who should own your infrastructure. Is that something you really want to outsource to a third party, knowing that you don't have control over it? That's a question that only you can answer. You also have to ask yourself, who's responsible if there's an outage? Are you responsible? Is SAP responsible? Is your hyperscaler responsible? Those are all performance issues and reliability issues that most organizations need to confront and face. Perhaps most notably, who owns the infrastructure pricing going forward? What is that price structure going to look like? And how locked in are you in that current environment? That's another question you've got to ask yourself. And that's why that 43% of SAP customers that are opting into the SAP RISE on the SAP infrastructure are facing a future problem, in my opinion, because they don't yet realize what those escalating costs and that lack of control is going to cost them in the long term. So this all comes down to delegated control versus retained control. It also comes down to long-term cost as well. Now let's talk about performance. In addition to architecture and where the software is hosted, you also have to think about performance. Now SAP will probably tell you that running S/4HANA on an SAP infrastructure is just going to work better, it's going to work faster, and S/4HANA is optimized for that SAP infrastructure. Well, there's a couple nuances that are left out of that comment, which is, first of all, with SAP, of course, they're going to have an optimized solution that runs best on their own infrastructure. But secondly, and most importantly, most of the time, performance issues are not related to the infrastructure hosting provider. Typically, it's related to other things happening within the software that you're using. So it could be the volume of data transactions. It could be the way you configured the software. It could be edge customizations that are slowing down the performance of the software. So I would submit to you that the infrastructure is less likely to have a material or noticeable impact on speed and performance as the actual way the software is deployed. So you have to look past that marketing spin and look past the fact that SAP is going to try and pressure you into using their infrastructure because, again, they want you all in on SAP. It's more revenue and profit to them, and they have more control over their long-term billings and cost to you. Now let's talk about what happens if you move forward with an SAP RISE contract. First and foremost, you have commercial lock-in. SAP controls everything at this point. They control your infrastructure. They control your SLAs, your service level agreements. They control your renewal terms. They control your commercial bundling and a host of other factors. So SAP has complete control not only over your applications now, but now they have control over your infrastructure as well. So what does this mean to you? Well, this means that you lose negotiating leverage. It's a lot harder to negotiate a cloud contract when SAP owns everything. You essentially have lost and diminished all of your negotiating power. And maybe even the bigger issue is that you lose your option to potentially exit that infrastructure agreement. It's a lot harder to move from an SAP infrastructure to Azure or AWS or some other hyperscaler in the future. And if you are all in on SAP, it just makes that switch a lot harder. So one way to frame RISE is to say that there are benefits to RISE, but it doesn't necessarily reduce risk. What it does is it moves the risk and centralizes it all within the SAP ecosystem. And I'll come back to how to navigate this and how to make the right decision for your organization later. But just to give you a little spoiler alert, if you're already all in on SAP and you're very happy with SAP and you know you're going to be an SAP shop for decades to come, it may make sense. But if there's any part of you that thinks that you might need flexibility and optionality in the future, you may want to rethink how you approach SAP RISE. So does SAP RISE make sense for you, and how do you make that decision? How do you come to the right conclusion for you? For some of you, you're going to find that SAP RISE on SAP's infrastructure is fine. Others are going to find that it doesn't make sense, and you want to preserve some of your flexibility, some of your negotiating leverage, and your long-term optionality. And so what I want to do is give you a bit of a framework here to help make that decision. So RISE can make sense if you don't want to have a lot of IT ownership internally. In other words, if you don't have a robust IT staff that knows SAP really well, and you don't have any desire to have that competency in-house, it may make more sense for you to outsource that to SAP. In this case, maybe it makes sense for you to get the advantage of speed and ease of contracting with SAP Rise, knowing that you're giving up a bit of flexibility later if that flexibility isn't as important because you don't have the internal competencies. But Rise is more risky if you are more concerned about long-term flexibility, long-term costs, and long-term optionality. So in other words, if you have uncertainty in your business, or if you know your business is going to evolve quickly, or if you're already uncertain as to whether or not SAP is the right long-term partner for you, it may make more sense to look at other options to hedge your bets against SAP, not to go a different direction than S4HANA, but to take S4HANA and have it hosted through Rise on a hyperscaler rather than an SAP managed infrastructure. So here's a quick decision matrix or checklist you can use to determine whether or not you should go down the path of SAP Rise with SAP or SAP Rise with a hyperscaler. Well, first of all, if you aren't concerned about long-term flexibility and you don't want to have and don't plan to have internal IT competencies around SAP, then SAP Rise with SAP probably makes more sense. If your higher priority is negotiating leverage and preserving your long-term options, then looking at SAP Rise with a hyperscaler probably makes a lot more sense. You may want to go look at Azure or AWS as a potential hyperscaler infrastructure provider. And if your priority is future optionality, then you probably don't want to bundle everything together under one SAP Rise contract. So here's the bottom line. Rise with SAP is not a bad thing necessarily. However, you need to be objective when evaluating your options. It's definitely a good thing for SAP, so they are going to pressure you into moving forward with an SAP Rise contract that bundles everything together, including infrastructure and managed services, etc. But what you have to do is look at yourself and your organization, your long-term strategy to decide what's best for you. And again, this is not a technology decision. Your IT group should have input into this process or into this decision, but ultimately this is a leadership and strategy decision that your top leadership within the organization needs to make, because this will have material effects on your long-term cost structure, your long-term risks, your long-term strategic advantages as an organization. And those are things that only leaders can decide for the organization. So that was a video from my recent YouTube channel where I talk about SAP Rise and some of the hyperscalers. What were some of your thoughts and takeaways from that, Darian?
Yeah, I thought it was a great video. Actually, I think it goes very well with the conversation that you guys had today, because I think you can take what other data points people are seeing, and then also it was great to see your opinion on things as well. I think one main takeaway I had was SAP is obviously positioning Rise as almost like this easy button, and that messaging frames Rise as the safest, fastest path to SAP ECC or to S4HANA. It also kind of has that bundling infrastructure, kind of like we talked with Microsoft earlier. So obviously Microsoft is not the only ones doing the bundling.
Yes.
But yeah, I just found it super interesting on that side of things. But with that, Eric, how should executives weigh speed versus long-term flexibility when evaluating Rise for SAP?
That's a great question. And the question exposes some of the conflict of interest between software vendor and customers. So software vendors' interests are in seeing you move to the cloud, ideally the public cloud as soon as possible. And reason being, because you get that annual or recurring revenue as a vendor, which means your investors are going to drive up your stock price. So the higher you can get your cloud annual or recurring revenue, the better you're going to do, and the more you're going to be rewarded by your board and by your investors. Just to give you a quick side note, SAP recently, just a few weeks ago, their stock price got hammered, not because they announced poor results, but because they announced recurring cloud revenue results that were 1 percentage point off or short of what they projected. It's just 1%, but the stock just got hammered. It got pummeled. And it was still very strong, still very healthy cloud revenue. But the fact that it wasn't as high as investors wanted just shows you how much pressure and how much money is at stake to get as many customers as possible onto these cloud solutions. So I think that's what vendors want. You as a customer, you probably want more flexibility than SAP wants to give you, not because they're necessarily bad people or they just dislike flexibility inherently, but because their software is meant for scale, not necessarily flexibility. So that competing or conflicting priority is something that It's really up to the customers and their independent advisors to help them navigate that reality, because that's that conflict, that tension is what ends up breaking a lot of these projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question I have is, at what point does commercial lock-in outweigh the convenience of bundled contracting, which I know we kind of talked about earlier, but I guess in terms of SAP in particular?
I think short-term lock-in is something that seems pretty innocuous. It doesn't sound like a big deal in the short term because I know I'm going to move to S/4HANA, or I know I'm going to move to Microsoft or whatever. I'm not necessarily thinking 3 to 5 to 10 years out when I have to switch systems, and that's where the pain and the cost is going to happen. So I think the money you save now through bundling, you're going to pay for it exponentially more in the future long term, because now you've lost negotiating leverage. Now you're locked into that vendor. Now it's going to be extremely high switching costs. You thought it was hard to implement ERP before. Imagine how hard it's going to be when you're on a public cloud scenario and now you're trying to switch from one public cloud provider to another. We haven't even begun to see even the surface of that wave of transformations in the future, and that's where things are going to get real ugly, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I found interesting on the video was the cost escalation and pricing ownership. So leaders must ask who controls that infrastructure in order to learn the pricing structure long term, and how easily they can adjust the strategy if the business needs to adjust, which I think plays into that lock-in obviously as well. But with that, Eric, what are the most common misconceptions executives have about that in general, of what questions to ask or what the pricing should look like?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just having transparency into what happens when I add more AI agents, or what happens when my consumption through my hyperscaler increases. What does that do to my cost structure? And do I have a say in it? Is it like an open checkbook that you can impose new pricing however you want, or have I set in or locked in some parameters to lock that down? So I think that's the big thing you have to look at, is not just what you're paying today. That's really not the issue. Once they get you locked in, then it's a lot easier for them to raise the prices longer term, because like I said, the switching costs are so high, they know you're not going to go anywhere unless you really have to. And they'll probably just try to keep raising prices until you cry uncle, or until the industry cries uncle and wants, and then they experience that pushback.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting. I feel like all of that is stuff that companies definitely need to consider before they even start their implementations.
Yeah, great conversation. We dove into a lot of stuff here today, and really appreciate all the great feedback we've gotten from the audience. And thank you, Darian, for another great episode. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting, produced by Major Town Production. So be sure to reach out to us if you'd like to learn more about your digital transformation and any questions you might have, and how we might be able to help you with that digital transformation. And look forward to seeing you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. In the meantime, have a great week. Take care, and we'll see you soon.